Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about the film The Suspect, which was produced in the United States in 1944. It's a noir period drama and the setting is London, 1902. There was a hand-packed husband. He was very unhappily married. His wife was very dominant and she was a kind of shrew. And they had a son together, and she got to even alienate her own son because of her temperament. And once he was in his shop and he was approached by a young woman who was a stenographer, and she was asking for a job. He didn't have any job to offer her, but then after a while, he offered her a job somewhere else. And then they were still meeting, and he slowly fell in love with the woman, and vice versa, but it was something platonic. They met, they saw each other, but since he was married, he didn't want to have any closer involvement with the woman. After a while, his wife found out that he was meeting a younger woman. She got to find out everything about the young woman, and she threatened to make a big scandal, to go to the woman's workplace, to go to her boarding house where she lived, and tell everyone what a low woman she was. She made a huge fuss, and her husband had already asked her to give him the divorce, but she refused because of what other people would say. And then it was a Christmas Eve, and then in the middle of this argument, the woman fell on the stairs. It's not shown to the audience the moment she fell. We can note that she screamed and that she passed away after that. And of course, there's a suspicion around the husband because they were having an argument and she was threatening a scandal, and it's hinted, it's not proven or said directly, but it's hinted that he might have killed his wife. And a police officer, he was very suspicious of the husband, and he tried to investigate the matter a little bit deeper. Meanwhile, both the man and the young woman, they met on the street after a while, because when the wife found out that he was seeing another woman, he broke up with her. He didn't want to see her anymore, but after a while, without any contact, they met again and they were finally in a relationship. And then the police officer, he said that he wanted this young woman to be a witness against the man when it comes to the killing of his wife. However, the man had married the young woman that same morning, so it wasn't legally possible that she was a witness against her own husband. And then his son, he got closer to his father again. He had a girlfriend, and his girlfriend had a family, so they attended the house. Everybody got along very well. And in the middle of this suspicion of the police officer, a neighbor overheard this conversation. And this neighbor, he was a scoundrel. He beat his own wife. He didn't work. He was a very terrible man. Then he approached the guy and said that he knew that the police was suspicious of him about the death of his wife, and he threatened him to tell to the police that he overheard the woman crying for help in the night she was murdered. Of course, it was a lie. He didn't actually hear anything, but he wanted to threaten his neighbor so he could blackmail his neighbor and got some easy money. Out of desperation, because he knew that the neighbor could put him in an awkward situation in the police, the neighbor got to poison the scoundrel one, and he put some poison in a whiskey. The scoundrel neighbor, he drank the whiskey and he passed away. And then, of course, the police officer got even more suspicious. In the middle of that, the guy's son, he received an offer to work in Canada. So he would move to Canada with his girlfriend. Then the guy asked his young second wife if she wanted to go to Canada. She said yes. So the guy, he and his second wife, they would follow his son to Canada. And everything was ready, and they went to the ship, and then the guy bumped into the police officer. And the police officer, he told a lie to the guy that his wife, who suffered so much with this scoundrel neighbor, the wife who was beaten by his neighbor and who was a good woman, who had a horrible marriage, he pretended that the wife of the scoundrel neighbor, he pretended that the police was accusing her and that she would be arrested for murdering her husband. And the guy, he knew it wasn't true because it was him who killed the guy. The police officer invented this story because he thought that this guy, even though he probably killed his wife and the scoundrel neighbor, that he still had some sense of decency and that he couldn't allow an innocent woman to pay for a crime that she didn't commit. And then the police officer left the ship when it was about to leave, and he saw that the guy, he left his wife and family in the ship and didn't go to Canada after all. He remained in England. And then it was hinted that in the last minute he didn't travel to Canada with his family because he wanted to confess his crimes to the police. Of course that it's not said directly if the man killed his first wife or not. We are not sure about what happened. Everything is hinted. But we can see that even if he killed those two people, he indeed had some sense of decency. He was genuinely in love with his second wife. He was truly a good father for his son, a good friend and a good member of the community who had made some horrible mistakes. And then this is how the film goes. This is sort of mystery. We aren't sure if he was guilty or not, but the fact that he gave up living to Canada in the last minute, why he would do that? And reportedly, he didn't tell anyone of his family. He simply left the ship in the last minute and remained in England, even though he was supposed to do the opposite. So we are hinted that probably he committed those crimes and that the police officer was right in creating this story, that the younger woman would be arrested for the death of her husband, because then he felt guilty and he couldn't allow a young woman to be arrested for something he didn't do. Another point is that this young woman, she married a much older man. He wasn't necessarily handsome, and she was much younger, she was much more beautiful, and she could have any other guy. But we must remember that this film is set in London in 1902. And at that time, it was much more common than nowadays that women married much older men because of security, financial stability, a good position in society, and apparently that young woman, she didn't have any relatives, and it wasn't really a good idea for a woman to be lonely at that time. So the marriage between people who were so different, it was more common in the time, so it made sense in the plot of the film. And it's a nice film. It's not common to see noir films being a period films, but there were all kinds of noir films. Most noir films were set in the era they were made, but some noirs, they were period films too, they were war films too, and I believe you are going to love this film. It's very one of a kind and interesting. That's all for now, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you!